This podcast is made possible by the listener members of Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nash Villager Podcast. It's January 14th, 2025. On this day in 2019, the U.S. National Safety Council announced sobering news. Data analysis showed that for the first time, Americans were dying from opioid overdoses at a higher rate than from car crashes. It was a galvanizing moment in the opioid epidemic, and it's one of the reasons why both state and federal governments have been working on complex, multi-pronged strategies. There are lawsuits, policy changes, healthcare efforts, and educational programs going on. The goal? To curb the overprescription of opioids, to crack down on drug company practices that encourage high sales of the medications, and to help people who've become addicted. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. Now, the opioid response is complicated. There are a lot of conflicting opinions and all kinds of hurdles. Some of the things the government is doing seem to be making a real difference, and some proven strategies are coming up against community discomfort. Back before Christmas, we heard excellent coverage from WPLN health reporter Catherine Sweeney on the hurdles to establishing effective clinics in some parts of Tennessee. Now, there's a lot more to be said and much more to be reported. It definitely can be messy stuff, but at the heart of it all, I think it's safe to say there's pretty widespread agreement that something has to be done. Agreement that there is a problem and on what the main driver is. That if people are dying of opioid overdoses, access to opioids is an issue. Last week, the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth released its annual report on children's well-being in this state. It's called State of the Child, and that report's always full of really interesting information. Here at WPLN, we tend to find several stories in the data each year. And this newest report shows a concerning figure with a strong echo of that opioid death rate announcement that came back in 2019. This new report shows that firearms now outpace car accidents for the cause of death in Tennessee kids and teens. Any way you look at it, the numbers are concerning. Tennessee has one of the top 10 highest child homicide rates in the nation. More than 80% of those involve guns. And when you combine homicides with unintentional deaths, 1 out of every 5 kids who dies in Tennessee is killed with a gun. That's a lot. And it sure seems like that should be preventable. Stats like those prompted a complex, multi-pronged response from state government when drug overdoses were at the center of the problem. But boy, it becomes way harder to even start a conversation when it's about guns. Today is the start of Tennessee's new legislative session. We had elections in November, and there's some degree of change in who is sitting at those desks in the House and Senate chambers. But will there be any change in willingness to even engage in meaningful debate over how to respond to the troublingly high rate of children killed with guns, of the high rate of child and teen access to guns? Will they come game to talk about safer storage, or perhaps revisiting whether it's wise to be a constitutional carry state where people don't have to demonstrate any kind of understanding about gun laws or firearm safety in order to legally carry them? At this point, so much is up in the air that we don't have an exact date on the books for the governor's State of the State address. It's not for sure whether he will call a special session to focus on school vouchers and disaster relief. And we don't know if legislative leaders will again push through strict rules that make it difficult for Democrats to even speak up about their concerns with moves being made by the Republican supermajority, or difficult for rank-and-file members of either party to file many bills. These next few weeks will tell us a lot. In just a few minutes, New York Times columnist and Middle Tennessee resident David French. That's coming up after the newscast.
Thematic Static on WNXP is the mixtape we make together, a themed set loosely organized by you, the listener, handpicking songs according to a theme. Airing first Thursdays at 9 a.m. and again Saturdays at 9 a.m., Thematic Static plucks your requests from the socials at WNXP Nashville and by voice memo at 615-320-9100. Thematic Static, the mixtape we make together, supported by United Record Pressing, only on WNXP.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. Nashville's transit referendum can move forward as planned. That's after a legal challenge threatened its future. WPLN Cynthia Abrams reports a judge cited several reasons for siding with the city.
First off, the judge ruled that the challenge itself was not valid under the Election Contest Act, given that there were no allegations of illegal ballots or fraud. She also affirmed the transit plan itself, ruling that the contents of the plan and the steps Metro took to develop it followed the requirements set out by state law. The plan, which will be carried out over the next 15 years, includes projects like new sidewalks, transit centers, and an improved bus system.
The half-cent sales tax increase, which will be used to fund the transit projects, is set to go into effect February 1st. The interim director of Metro Arts has resigned. Paulette Coleman took over the city art department in May after last year's chaotic grants cycle. It left artists and art nonprofits waiting months to receive grant money they were promised. WPLN's Char Daston reports Coleman's resignation comes at a moment when this year's grant cycle is shaping up to be just as chaotic.
Before last year's debacle, Metro Arts would distribute grant money in the late summer or early fall. This time around, it's January, and grant proposals haven't even been scored, let alone funded. Coleman's resignation means Metro Arts has to navigate a precarious situation without a leader. That's because Metro Arts has several constraints in figuring out how to distribute grant money this fiscal year. The agency is currently under a conciliation agreement with several other city departments, meaning they all have to sign off on a funding plan, then get it approved by Metro Council. But last week, hours before an important filing deadline, Metro Arts staff say they sent the wrong draft of the grant funding plan to the other city agencies. They say they corrected the error, but that the plan still might need work before next Tuesday's Metro Council meeting. If it's not ready for Metro Council next week, that could lead to further funding delays. Char Daston, WPLN News.
Methane gas, the fracked fossil fuel that's also called natural gas, powers a lot of Tennessee. But who uses the most gas? WPLN's Caroline Egger says the answer might surprise you.
So, who does use the most methane gas? Here's a multiple choice. A. Electricity, meaning the Tennessee Valley Authority's big gas plants. B. Industry, ranging from chemical plants to corn syrup factories. Or C. Buildings. This is the gas used for heating and cooking in homes and businesses. It is industry. The electricity share will ramp up soon as TVA builds more gas plants, but for now, industry is the biggest gas gorger by a wide margin. Caroline Eggers, WPLN News.
Industry accounted for nearly 40% of Tennessee's total gas use in 2023. That's according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. Nationally, gas use is one of the primary sources of planet-warming emissions, now much larger than coal. To cut gas use in Tennessee, TVA will need to switch from gas plants to renewables, and buildings and industry will need to further electrify. While some Nashville properties have sold at eye-popping prices lately, there have also been some moving for notable losses. The Tennessean reports a pair of downtown office buildings sold last month for $115 million less than their purchase price 5 years earlier. Possible reasons for the dip include low office occupancy rates across the country. And these specific buildings, the 20-story Phillips Plaza on Union Street and Parkway Towers on James Robertson Parkway, well, they date to the 1960s and 70s. The Nashville Business Journal, meanwhile, reports the 249-unit East Side Heights apartments recently sold at a slight loss. Country singer Carrie Underwood will perform at Donald Trump's presidential inauguration on Monday. The Grammy Award winner and American Idol champion will perform America the Beautiful with the Armed Forces Chorus and the United States Naval Academy Glee Club. In a statement to the Tennessean, Underwood said, quote, "I am humbled to answer the call at a time when we must all come together in the spirit of unity and looking to the future." Underwood has not publicly revealed her political views. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. Political commentator and writer David French is well known in politically conservative circles, but his independent views often leave him at odds with some people in those circles. French recently joined This Is Nashville and host Khalil Ekulona in a wide-ranging conversation about political discourse in the United States, and specifically in his home state of Tennessee. Here's an excerpt.
Some people would look at state politics and feel like the situation that the state is currently in with having Republicans, conservatives have this super majority. They feel like it's permanent. Things will never change. But looking at history, super majorities have kind of flip-flopped back and forth between Democrats and Republicans.
Absolutely.
But there was a different way that our state legislators and our state elected leaders kind of went about governing.
Well, I don't think there's anybody who would contest that the Tennessee GOP has changed a lot. I mean, from Howard Baker and Lamar Alexander and Bob Corker to, honestly, if you look at some of the most embarrassing members of Congress in the entire United States Congress, they're disproportionately from Tennessee. I mean, are you kidding me with some of these guys? And so, you have a Tennessee GOP that's sort of almost like a canary in the coal mine of the GOP more broadly. It is a downgrade to go from a Howard Baker to a Scott Desjardins, for example. That's a down. That's how would anyone say that this is the Tennessee GOP on the right path? But you're exactly right. These things have a way of correcting over time, and what often ends up happening is the excesses of single-party rule. When you have supermajority single-party rule, almost always they plant the seeds of their own demise. So when you have single-party supermajority rule, that creates an arrogance, it creates a sense of impunity, it spawns corruption, and eventually people get very angry at that. It's very interesting. If you look at the voting patterns in 2024, some of the parts of America that shifted red the most were some of the bluest parts of America. And so these are people who had experienced supermajority single-party rule in other parts of the country and didn't like what they saw. And I think the reality is democracy suffers over time without robust political competition between two competent parties. And anytime you have one party assuming an outsized role, start the clock ticking.
Yeah.
Just start the clock ticking, because there will be a reckoning. There will be a consequence of that single party rule.
You said something interesting. Two competent parties.
Yeah.
I don't often share my own views too often on the show, but I don't feel like either one of the major parties are very competent right now.
No, I would actually love to meet a smart person who would argue that they are. They're not. They're not. And part of this actually is the result of the single party rule that spread out across the country. So a lot of people come into national politics out of single party states. And so, if you've got people coming into politics in the Democratic Party out of California, they're used to ruling the roost. If you're coming out of you're coming out of Tennessee and you're a Republican, you're used to ruling the roost. And so I think that some of these skills about compromise, communication, we're losing them. The big sort, which is not a term I came up with, but comes up from a guy named Bill Bishop, a book he wrote about 20 years ago, which was so brilliant and prescient. And the big sort means that we're all living around people who are more like-minded. And that is poor preparation for participation and pluralism, because you don't even understand your political opponents. You have caricatures of your political opponents. And so you're walking into Washington as a warrior, not a legislator. And those are different mindsets. And so you can see it in how people are running, right? I'm running to take the fight to the other side.
Yeah.
I'm running as your gladiator, not your legislator. And that creates a poisonous poisonous sort of culture, but it is a natural consequence of the combination of sort of these single-party states and gerrymandering.
And this has led for the thirst from no matter where you lie on the political divide to own the Dems, own the libs, or own the conservatives.
Totally. So there's this phenomenon called the law of group polarization. This is coined by a Harvard law professor named Cass Sunstein. But he reviewed, this is about, again, almost 30 years ago, he reviewed all of the social science about groupthink. And what he found was that when like-minded people gather, they become more extreme. And so what that means is, if you're living in a community where everyone thinks like you, check on yourself in about a year or 2 years, and you're going to be more extreme almost always. Not everybody, of course, but almost always. You'll find yourself, if thinking yourself 2 years old, 2 years ago was a compromiser, weak. Now you're strong. This is a universal human phenomenon. You get a group of people together who are against gun control, and at the end of the conversation, they're going to be even more for gun rights. Get a group of people together who are for gun control. At the end of that conversation, they're going to be more for gun control. It's just what human beings do. And so you can start to see how these single-party states can go so wrong.
You can listen to the full episode with David French by searching for This Is Nashville in your favorite podcasting app. Thanks for listening to the Nash Villager podcast. We take this look at Nashville news every weekday. If you like it, go ahead and subscribe on your favorite podcasting app and tell a friend or give us a mention on your socials. It really helps get the word out. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can become a member at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.